Adventure is in my blood. Finding treasures big or small and having fun is what it's all about. With my wife Melissa and our 3 kids, life is pretty full. But there isn't a mountain we can't climb together. This isn't your ordinary antique store. My name is Alex Archbold and this is Curiosity Inc.
I'm home, honey. Hey guys, and welcome to today's episode. Well, I have the Cadillac completely full right now. I went back to the lady's house who had a collection of antique bottles and other sort of things, but she primarily took from the trash, binning, going to old dump sites about 60 years ago or so. There's a lot of old stuff in there. I'm gonna unpack these boxes and go through them. I know there's a lot more bottles, and I gave a bit of a heads up to our good friend Bob the Bottle Man, who's gonna come over, I imagine, at some point today to come check these out. With any luck, I won't have to sit on these bottles for too long because, well, the store is really full and I have room for tons of bottles. I kind of just like to keep the really cool pieces around, and all the extra stuff that I don't normally carry, well, that's got to find a home right away. So let's see, let's unpack the car, go through and see what I got, and with any luck, this is my prediction, hopefully, is that I'll be able to sell all this stuff before the day is out. Let's see what happens and do some unboxing. Well, this represents the lion's share of stuff that I had in the back of the Cadillac. This almost all fit in the trunk, which is why it's nice to drive a big old North American car. You can fit lots in it. And every box is packed full of bottles. Now, I'm going to have to go through these a little bit. I might see if Bob wants to take it kind of as it is. But I'm hoping to find some Watkins bottles, because this little trunk here is, in fact, a Watkins dealer trunk, probably from the 1920s or so. They would have carried this around to clients' houses. And Watkins is still around and sold door to door to this day, but this was their little sample trunk for all their bottles and so forth, and that's just kind of a fun little thing. It'd be nice to fill it with original Watkins bottles in the top. So that's what I'm kind of looking for today, is to make this trunk complete. But some of these other items, well, heck, we'll go through and see exactly what we have here. It's generally the bottles that you can tell what they're from. Like this one says New Brothers Herbicide for the scalp. Probably a dandruff control bottle or rash control. Still has the little stopper on the top there. Or like this one. Campagna's Italian Bomb. That's right, throw an Italian bomb at them, but that's not what they're talking about. This is nice. It has the original lid, or the original cap on there. And people will collect certain types of medicine bottles, or, you know, the farther back you go, the more interesting it gets. Typically, it's the bottles like this that people are looking for or collecting. If you get one that's plain, they're not as interesting. That's likely, it has measurements on it, so that's probably a medicine bottle of some sort. But you can see it's a little bit earlier because you've got all these little imperfections in the glass. Just the way that they were pouring it or manufacturing it was a lot more crude. And sometimes you can tell from the seam on it whether the seam goes up to the lip. If they formed it, if the seam goes all the way up over the lip, I think it's a little bit newer. If it ends there and they had to put this little end on after the fact, that's a little bit older. So this is probably a fairly old medicine bottle. But haven't seen any Watkins bottles in here just yet. Wild Strawberry Extract. Dr. Fowler's. This was kind of cool. See, it says Richard Hudnut, New York. Richard Hudnut was one of America's very first cosmetics companies, and they made perfume and cosmetics and makeup and so forth. He was around, I think, 1855, died in the early 20s in France. He was, you know, a very early American entrepreneur, and this would have been a bottle probably that had a perfume or fragrance inside of it. But really interesting. It's got the American Eagle on it. If you're into cosmetics or you're into doing makeup and that sort of thing, this is a nice piece of early American history. And not sure what that was doing in a garbage dump here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, but there it is. Kind of a neat thing. Also thought it was interesting. A lot of times you see shoe polish in a tin. This was shoe polish that came in a little glass jar, so you'd have to pour it out, I guess probably onto a rag and use it. And I've got that old shoe polish shoe shine stand. It probably had little glass jars like that in it because it's from around that same era. And going through some of these bins. There's lots of little medical bottles like that. Raleigh's. That's a typical sort of medical bottle. Some of these I'm not overly familiar with. BJ Johnson, Toronto. BJ Johnson was actually BJ Johnson Soap Company. This would have housed shampoo. So it's an early form of shampoo bottle. Don't think you'd want that in your shower nowadays. Probably having a glass bottle anywhere near, especially once it gets all soapy, is not a great idea. But yeah, that was, they made palm olive shampoo. I am used to hearing palm olive being used as a dish soap, but that's kind of cool. Guess you'd use that in your hair. I've noticed a trend from this batch. There's a lot of alcohol bottles, whiskey bottles, nice old DH Mum and Company champagne bottle. They're still around, actually. That's probably a good 100-year-old champagne bottle. Too bad it's not still full. Mind you, sometimes people say, oh, it'd be nice to find a little bottle of champagne. But if they're not properly kept, they can go pretty bad. But there's a lot of alcohol bottles, and then there's also been a lot of hair tonic bottles like this. That was a hair tonic bottle. So somebody was balding and liked to party 100 years ago. As long as they weren't drinking on account of the hair loss, yeah, let's assume that they just partied and were losing their hair. Either way, you can kind of tell little stories from batches of bottles that come out of these sites, but I'm sure many families would have deposited garbage at that point. But you definitely notice a trend. I've gone through a few of the bottles and I've pulled up some that were kind of interesting here. That's a little perfume bottle. And a few little things that I don't know if Bob will be interested or not, but that I think are cool. I'm gonna keep digging through. This was actually, there was a few pictures which I'll show later on, but this was hanging on the wall, and the reason I got it is it's a very early pioneer scene from my area, from Alberta. This would be 1800s, somewhere in that late 1800s sort of range. Of course, you can see they're building with log houses with sod roofs. So they'd put dirt on the roof and grow grass off of it. You'd have a sod roof. That's what our early pioneers did around here. You know, far cry from probably where they're living in Europe. But just a really neat piece. And she said that she had repainted the frame. This is probably the original frame that she has spray painted gold. So not ideal that it's been painted, but it's nice that it's got the original frame. So I'm gonna keep digging. It's a nice early soda bottle from a company called Squeeze Beverages, which I'm guessing is probably like an orange soda. Decent condition. It's got this really ornate carved glass, which would have been kind of expensive for them to push these bottles out with that design on it. Nice shaped bottle. And sometimes you have to be careful. You might think it's just a regular bottle and then they've got something written on the bottom which makes it a little bit more interesting. What's this? Peter Pan sauce. Well, that's what happened to him. I guess he went into the sauce making business. Well, it looks to me almost like an HP sauce bottle or steak sauce. I'm guessing that's probably what it was. But who knows, maybe Peter Pan sauce is still out there. There's all sorts of little fun bottles in here. Kind of going through and seeing what else is in here. Now this box had some items that I was interested in more for myself, as they are very historical. So this is the first train across the Saskatchewan River as she pulled into Edmonton, 1902. So that's a picture, an original picture of the first train that came into Edmonton, Alberta. That is a good historic piece. You know, I've seen pictures of these from the archives. I don't know if I have it from that exact angle, but what a great photograph to get, an original like that. And that's usually what I'm after. I'm hoping that I can find some good historic pieces. I love history. I love maintaining it. So for me, that's a really, really fun find. Okay. When I thought I was crazy for driving my car, look what pulled up behind me. That's pretty darn cool. Maybe he thinks I need a tow because my water pump was acting up on me last week. He's even got his little flasher on the roof. Okay, he is driving this as his daily vehicle. See, everybody thinks I'm crazy for driving the Cadillac in winter, and here you are driving an old GM tow truck with the Weaver auto crane on the back still. So what year is this beauty?
Mostly a 36 GMC.
Okay. And is the engine original in it, or?
No, it's a whole modern driveline. 350 Chevy, 400 turbo automatic.
So you can keep up with traffic then?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it looks fantastic. I saw this pull up and I was like, man, I got to come out and see what's going on out here. And on top of that, he shows up with missing pieces that I needed for my Cadillacs. This is just a great day all around. Oftentimes these little bottles carried the most potent of things inside of them. They could have dopamine, opium. I'm laughing. I mean, they're empty now, but they were, you know, kind of hard drugs went in there. That's why they're so tiny, because just a little dab will do you. Now, you know, not commonly dispatched through your local pharmacist nowadays, not in the little bottle like that, but there are certainly collectors, and the tinier the bottle, probably the more potent the thing that was inside of it. Now, I did have some early Asian opium bottles here, just all sorts of little odds and sods and treasures in here. But these small little pharmacy bottles are quite collectible, and this whole box is just jam-packed full of them. Found a few fun little treasures. This was kind of cute. It's a little sugar dish made by Medelta Potteries, of course from Medicine Hat, Alberta. But what's really interesting about this, first off, it has the lid, which is oftentimes missing, but if I turn it around, you'll see that that was in fact intended for the Royal Canadian Air Force, so probably Second World War. Really interesting little piece that they were making for wartime use, and it's remained intact all these years. Dug it up out of the ground to think somebody would have tossed that. Very cute little dish. There was this in here too. It says Gordon's shaker bottle for cocktails, and it's sort of a frosted glass, but this would have been, you know, for mixing up your special drinks here, maybe a martini. Pretty fun little thing, probably right around the turn of the century. No cracks or chips. Fun thing if you collect antique barware. This is a bottle, it says right on it, Pluto water. Now if you go, okay, well, what was Pluto water? It was, I guess, back around the turn of the century, people were really worried about being regular. So it's a laxative. It was apparently a really potent one, but sales were so good of this stuff from the early 1900s that by the time 1919 came around, it took 450 train cars just to move the amount of product that this Pluto Water company was selling. This stuff was all over the place. So apparently a lot of people needed a laxative back in those days. And this guy drank a whole, it's like the size of a Coke bottle. Like, how bad is your system that you need to drink a Coke bottle sized laxative? You know, chug it, glug, glug, glug. You know, you'd have to stay back. Good thing they had the trap doors on the back of their underwear so it could just blast off when this thing took effect. This was a funny little item. These, now it's not a risque brassiere. It is in fact protective eyewear. Oh, it smells funky. Yet I have it on my head anyway. So if you want to look like an insect, I guess you wear these and protect from little bits of filament. It's just wire mesh, so probably wouldn't stop a whole lot of stuff from getting through, just bigger bits of debris. But early protective eyewear. Probably, I would say this is probably World War II or prior to the war. It's got that sort of look and feel like aviator's glasses almost. So I've been finding a few fun little things. Now, I've got a few of the better items set aside. Some of the more interesting soda bottles that I haven't seen before. This I think must have been, it's called the Quick Stick, patented in 1919. And it has a little depressor on the top, spring-loaded, so I think it would control the flow of the glue, and I believe that was a glue bottle. But very, very unique, and I love the fact that it still has the brass lid. You can see this was buried for years, but yet stayed in decent condition because brass is just a heck of a good product. So if you have items that are brass, well, heck, you could bury it in your yard and it'll stay intact for quite a long time. All sorts of other little accessories, including some more stoppers. These are from McLaughlin, and this is an Edmonton-based bottle. All these little old celebrity cards, you can see here. Clark Gable, probably, let's see, 1947 is the date on here. These almost look like they've got little tickets or tokens, so maybe this was issued or given to you when you went somewhere. You can see the little stamps and numbers on the back for dates. Kind of a fun little thing. maybe I'll have to investigate and see what those are from. If you know at home where you got these from, you can put it in the comments. To me, it has a thickness like it's a ticket, or that you would have, you know, received these for some other purpose other than just collecting. But somebody obviously collected a whole bunch of them. Pretty interesting. Another little Asian container. Now, around the turn of the century, of course, there was quite a few Asian immigrants that were working on the railway. Some of those items have ended up near railway tracks and are sometimes found around there. That might have held like a rice wine. It doesn't have a drinking sort of spout on it though. But you do come across those every so often. A couple other Northern Alberta Railway artifacts, a hat, a couple little stickers, some latches and hardware. I always collect this stuff, especially if I'm doing some custom builds around the shop. It's nice to use old hardware. A knife sharpener right there. Comes in handy. But probably most interesting, aside from when you saw the train picture, but these early pictures from Canada, from visiting the Rockies. And this one says, Edmonton, Alberta, Northwest Territories, 1904. Dominion Lands Office. So this might be, yeah, someone's instructions for how you can live, caretakers of buildings and grounds. So these are rules for how to own or take care of your property in Edmonton, Alberta over 100 years ago. And telling you what type of heater you can use, general instructions for hot water apparatuses, paying for your accounts, how you can display flags, and what day you can display flags. Look at all the rules. Dominion Day, July 1st. We don't celebrate. It's Canada Day now, but it was Dominion Day then. So here's all the different flags that you're allowed to fly and how to keep your fires clean in your yard. So this is basically like if you were buying property in the city of Edmonton in 1904, I presume that the land titles office would give you this as sort of a, hey, here's how to take care of your place. Funny little picture in there too. It's a nice early book, Canada Ocean to Ocean. And I'm guessing it's from around the same time, since it's from the same person, R. Wiley. Most of these come from the late 1800s to early 1900s. And these would be very early photographs and pictures from around Canada from that time. You know, giving people ideas of what the rest of the country looked like. And if you lived on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, here in Alberta or Saskatchewan, you might never see these sites. It would seem like a whole other little wonderland, and maybe would inspire you to go traveling and see different things that you wouldn't normally see. Always fun to go through and just see how much our cities have changed or developed in that time. Love early Canadian history. And an update, I did find out what these little cards are from. They're from a fortune-telling weigh scale. It would give you, in this case, a little star card. And it would also print on it, on the back here, what your weight was. So I was kind of looking through, and it all came from the same person. It looks like they start off kind of weighing around 224 pounds after the war. And it looks like they had a goal to maybe lose some weight, because as things progress, in the next year they've lost 10 pounds. And then later on, they're down to 191. So this person, maybe they had some success. Maybe they were losing weight by drinking one of Edmonton's many popular laxatives at that time, like Pluto water. But either way, whatever they were doing was working for them. So that is what those are. Kind of neat, actually, and kind of fun. I mean, if you have a weight loss goal, I don't know if it's the best idea to put somebody who's like Clark Gable, chiseled, you know, fit guy, and you're like, man, I've got to lose weight, and then you spit out a Clark Gable picture, and you're like, yep, got to keep working. But pretty neat little part of our history. This is dated 1905, and it's a souvenir of the birth of the new province, Alberta. So you can see we weren't even a province at that point. We just became a province in 1905. And this is just a little celebration that the Revlon brothers, who had a department store, obviously they were promoting their business, but that's the sort of things they sold. Dress goods, so all sorts of fabrics, probably patterns. And I love the tile, the floor that they had. This gives me a good idea about how these early stores were decorated too. Portaging between Pelican. There's a scow, looks like a York boat almost. Warehouse, really early pioneer souvenir. I mean, look, there's their building right there. So this pamphlet I'm holding came from that building in 1905 to celebrate the opening of our province. Not much for tall trees in the river valley. If you go down by the river valley now, it's completely forested. A lot of people forget that humans actually planted a lot of trees. So many of the trees we have in our city are from settlers. And here's a scene. This looks like more 1930s or 1920s. Edmonton has obviously grown a fair bit in the 20 some odd years that last picture book was from. The buildings are more substantial. There's more hustle and bustle happening around, bigger buildings. But yeah, you can tell from the cars, this is probably gonna be like late 20s, early 30s. But just really fun to get these early Edmonton pieces. And this sort of stuff sells really quick. Now I'm hoping to keep some of the Edmonton historic items together just in case I find someone who can, well, I'd like to put a presentation in the shop and do a little history of Edmonton area at some point. Here's an unusual one. This, if you can see, says Florida water on it. Now, if you're not familiar with Florida water, it's been around since the 1880s, roughly around that time. Florida named after, of course, the Fountain of Youth. This water that was in here kind of was citrusy, had an alcohol base, but it's believed, even to this day, by people who practice Wicca and other sorts of witchcraft and spells and so forth, that it has a lot of healing and spiritual properties to a lot of people. So this is sort of like an early witchcraft kind of piece, if you look at it that way. But people also used it for let's see, cologne for scenting themselves, or as a cleaner. Just had a lot of different uses and properties. But what's interesting about it is its association with the spiritual side of things when it comes to witchcraft and so forth. So kind of neat to find. Somebody had ordered themselves some Florida water from somewhere, and this is an early bottle, no seam on that spout, which means it was put on after the fact. This is probably an 1800s bottle. And other than needing a little bit of cleaning, it's in pretty good shape. This is kind of a funny shape, yet familiar shape of a bottle. If you look at it and you think, well, I wonder what would have been in there. It kind of looks like a ketchup bottle. And if you do a little research, you'll find that Curtis Brothers, based out of Rochester, New York, says preservers on it, were one of the first preservers of tomatoes and pickles and jellies and so forth. They're still in business to this day. They were founded in 1868, I believe. And this bottle would have been for their Blue Label ketchup, which was sold in the late 1800s, early 1900s. One of their very first products that they sold. This is a very early glass bottle, very primitive with all the bubbles and inclusions in it. So if a person collects ketchup bottles, which I'm sure there's probably somebody out there who's just wild about ketchup, my son Jason is, maybe he'll start a ketchup collection at some point. That would be a nice addition to their collection. But I'm gonna put that into the box with all these other kind of cool and interesting bottles that hopefully we'll be able to sell as one big collection. And probably no surprise, Bob the Bottle Man is here, and we got you some bottles.
You sure did.
Yeah, he's just loading out.
Load it up.
Be careful on the lip there. Well, Bob heads out. Have a good one. And he heads off in his tow truck with some die cast in hand. I'm gonna head back in the shop here and start getting ready to close up for this. Okay, well, thanks to Bob, who looks all worn out over there now from hauling bottles out to his vehicle. I am no longer in the bottle business. Bob has cleaned me out of bottles, and not only that, as we're standing here, Bob will attest, we're standing here and he's loading bottles in. Another lady walks in with even more bottles for sale. And what happened with those?
I snagged those two.
Yeah, he bought those too. So when you think that I'm crazy for the collections that I have, remember, all I need is a couple crazy customers to make everything work by having a retail store like this. Oh, thanks so much for watching today's episode. I hope you thought it was fun. If you want to see more about the bottles, you can check out Bob's channel, which is called...
That's Bob Harder, but look for Bob the Bottle Man.
Bob the Bottle Man. So if you look on YouTube for Bob the Bottle Man, you'll see him probably talking about some of the finds that he's got. Thank you so much for watching today's episode, guys. If you haven't subscribed, make sure to do that. You can check us out on Facebook under Curiosity Inc. or on Instagram at Curiosity Inc. YEG. We'll see y'all soon, and bye for now.